Hi, I'm Laura Mize, pediatric speech-language pathologist, and welcome to my podcast number 473, Stage 8, Early Role Play and Pretending with Peers in Stages of Play for Toddlers and Preschoolers with Language Delays. Brought to you by my website, Teach Me to Talk, where we're the largest provider of ASHA-approved CEUs for early intervention. Thanks so much for being here with me today. If this is your first time, welcome, and if it's not your first time, welcome back. I'm so happy that you're joining me for today's course. Let me explain what you're watching or listening to. Each of my podcasts is actually a continuing education course for therapists, which means that they get a certificate and then credit toward their licensure or anything that they would need to acquire continuing education for. But parents, you are more than welcome to watch this show, and we're so happy to be able to provide these quality educational experiences for you as well. So again, we're so happy to be able to do that here on YouTube. Now, the standard length for a show or a course is about an hour. I hope today's course runs about an hour, but sometimes we run a little longer than that. If you can't watch in one sitting, whether you're a therapist or a parent watching this, that's okay. You can break it up and just watch as your schedule allows. If you are new to Teach Me to Talk, and particularly to our YouTube channel here, we would so appreciate your support with you subscribing here or a like, and thank you so much for doing that. For therapists, you'll find the link to get your CE credit in our $5 CEUs, and that includes your certificate for your credit and also a handout for today's show. If you're a parent or another kind of educator and also want this information, there's a link there for you to get that as well. Lots of parents like that because then you have the written summary to go back and refer to, and then to be able to share that with the people that are important with you and that are helping you with working with your own late talker. So maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a grandparent, or maybe even your spouse. So take a look at that if you're interested in that. All right, today we are all the way up to stage 8 in stages of play, and we're up to early role play and pretending with peers. Now, all this information is on the handout, so if you've already purchased that, please follow along. We are up to the 8th stage of play, and this work is based on Dr. Carol Westby's Symbolic play scale, and I've taken the pretending part of that, but added some things and tweaked it so we can kind of use this approach to look at treating play skills with all of our little friends, no matter what their diagnosis is. And again, it goes a little bit beyond that symbolic piece because we're looking at the fine motor piece too. Today, all the way up to stage 8, we are looking at the chronological age from 36 months to 48 months. So that's from a 3rd birthday to a 4th birthday. And remember, we're looking at this for how these skills typically come in what we would consider to be a more typical representation of play skill development. Now, because of that, our older preschoolers, or maybe our friends in kindergarten or even in 1st grade, or maybe even older children with really significant speech language disorders will also be in this stage of play. If you are strictly a birth to 3 SLP, which I was for many, many years, this is the next step. So we, again, may not ever get there with a kid who's on our caseload, but we always want to be thinking about, especially for our kids who, again, only have language delays or only maybe have a little speech delay, and we're really working with them, we still need to be cognizant of where their play skill development is so that we can continue to enhance and facilitate those skills. So this is that next rung up of skills for lots of you, so I'm excited that you'll have an opportunity to probably get some new ideas, even for your older 2-year-olds on your caseload who, again, are ready for this developmentally. All right, so what's going on here in stage 8? So let's just talk about the big developments for play skills. Now, as the name for this stage implies, what are we really looking at here? We said early role play and then pretending with peers. And so many exciting developments happen socially here for children between 3 and 4. We finally get to associative and even cooperative play. So we're seeing lots of peer interaction go on, especially with language. Now, previously we said in that this previous period that we reviewed back at stage 7 in show 472, we said that those children were again moving from being onlookers in play and moving toward that they now mostly did parallel play where they're sitting with another child and they're doing lots of maybe nonverbal things where they're looking at each other and they're playing with the same toy. So you might see some imitation or even reciprocal imitation. This child does it, so that makes the other child want to do something, and then the other child does it, and it makes the original child want to imitate him. And so you can see some nice back and forth, even if it's without words. But here at stage 8, kids add words. And so again, I don't mean just, it's not like they've been completely silent with their little same age peers, but they haven't had, again, the back and forth turn taking that we see with language. And it even moves beyond that. Now they're starting to really cooperate and make those plans. And we'll talk about that, how they start to play together. We'll talk about that as we proceed. Now, since we have so much ground to cover today, I better not linger here. Let's talk about all the specifics during our systematic review. All right, let's talk about the biggest language developments. We looked at the play skills, the big things going on there, the social language that starts with little peer interaction there. But let's talk about the things that go on individually with language development between 3 and 4. Kids are using lots of language for new functions, and here they start to even talk about, direct, and plan things. And so we've seen that cognitive progression come along, particularly over the last couple of stages, where they've started to take on new roles, where back at 18 months they started to really want to do housework activities, and then they started to, at 24 months, really pretend with activities that they did on a familiar every day, that were really, really familiar to them. And then the next stage, they started doing what they saw their caregivers do. So their parents, or maybe if they're in childcare, their little group of 2 or 3 teachers that are with them all the time, maybe they started to imitate and take on some of those roles. And so now we're even beyond that, where things, and in the last stage, remember, it moved to less familiar activities, where children started to pretend that they were maybe going to the doctor, or something that had happened to them, a routine that they had done. They started to, if they do circle time at daycare or at preschool, you started to see them try to do that with dolls or characters in play. So here we're adding now the real language component with other children their age. And remember, it's easier for children to talk to adults or older children. Why? Because the older child or adult will compensate and will fill in the blanks and will read the younger child's cues, and then will start to change the conversation, or to direct the conversation to ways that will be more helpful to the child to facilitate that communication. Same age peers can't do that. Now, we can certainly see that with older children. Let's say that we have an older preschool who's paired with a younger preschooler. Maybe you'll see some of that, but for the most part, again, they're kind of the same way. And that's not to say that children, let me back up and say this. When we see a typically developing child, or a child, let's don't say that. When we see a child who's older and he's starting to play with younger children, or even with some of this character play or baby doll play, we will see a child start to change their tone of voice. Like, you can tell, oh, she's talking to her baby doll now because she's trying to talk real sweet, or she's again that language is directed to that character. But you don't see like a compensatory strategy, like another 3-year-old is not really going to be able to think, oh, I better make my utterances shorter so that my friend who has a language delay is going to be able to process that better. So you don't have that, but you do have that with an older child or with an adult. So that's why sometimes we see some success there. And sometimes parents will look at that and say, my child is so mature because they only want to be with adults. They only want to be with older children. That's their maturation level. And I'm not really trying to degrade an adult who says that. I'm just saying that's not what's happening. It's that they really need that scaffolding approach, where an adult meets them where they are and then kind of says, this is their little zone, and I'm going to stay in this zone, and then help them again take that little leap. But I'm doing all of the compensating and all of the modifying. And so when kids can't play with same age peers like that, sometimes again that explains it, because they're not getting enough cues and enough feedback to make that experience as enjoyable as they would like, so they might tend to avoid. And so that's just my whole thing here with language from 3 to 4. We do see, again, lots of child interaction, but maybe for some of our little friends, not the same level of interaction or language that you would see them being able to use with an adult. All right, there we go. let's talk about the next big development for language between the 3rd birthday and the 4th birthday. And form and content continue to mature with specific jumps in verb use. They're now using past tense and future tense verbs along with auxiliary verbs, and those are our helping verbs. Is, are, can, those kinds of words. Lots of other new words too. Well, let me talk about the verbs real quick, and we'll get to the specifics, but just with verbs, remember past tense, and it's even some irregular past tense verbs that are really familiar to the child that they hear you say all the time. They start to incorporate those. And so instead of saying, I eat the apple yesterday, they start to say, I ate the apple yesterday. And again, they're picking that up, that grammar, that, as SLPs say, that syntax, just by hearing you use those kinds of things. But now they're developmentally there with their language so that they can change that. And they also start to use future tense. And you hear it here with I gonna or I wanna instead of I am going to or I want to. They shorten that. It's almost like slang, and so we start to hear that come into. We'll also hear some new words like conjunctions, and when kids start to do conjunctions, and those are words like and, so, because, those kinds of words, they join not only subjects and verbs here with like I want ice cream and cookies, but they also begin to join their sentences, so they have longer sentences, and so they make those compound sentences. I go to kitchen and I get some milk, so you start to hear that. And then when we hear that as SLPs, our ears just perk up. We think, my goodness, that is so long. Listen to that. But that's certainly how kids start to really get that longer length, and they go from talking even in sentences to longer sentences and then paragraphs. And so conjunctions really kind of speed that process along and really give kids a way. And we start to see kids at this age, it's really interesting too, particularly our kids who have not had language delays, but we start to see them know that they want to talk in longer utterances or in longer episodes. And so then they sometimes start to get even some little disfluency at this stage, and it's not a true disfluency, but you see them really holding their place in conversation and marking their place, and even doing and or and then and they're really kind of looking for their words. And again, that really tells you this child is going from a shorter episode of speech or language to something longer. And so that's totally typical, and I wanted to mention that here because we see that a lot. All right, and again, we're going to do the specific milestones is when we do our systematic review of language, but those are just our bigger things that we see, kind of the overall things. So for stage 8, like we've done in every other stage, let's go ahead and just do that systematic review. And we are going to zip through these because we're covering a whole year. Lots of times in this podcast series with Play, we've just done even little slivers with a 2-month window or a 3-month window. And here we're looking at a whole year. So let's go through these pretty quickly now. So take a look at your handout, and we'll begin with play skills. Now remember that this information about play skills is predominantly from Carol Westby's work. All right, so let's just zip through these skills. So number 1, a child reenacts previous events and modifies the original outcomes. So we call this compensatory play. So what does that mean? For example, if a child gets a shot at the doctor's office, what might have happened? He probably teared up a little bit, and then the sucker came out, and he got his Band-Aid, and he was okay. Or he could have really lost it and had a terrible ride home, and you couldn't get him to calm down for hours and hours, and you just kept talking about it and kept looking at it and kept picking at it, and then maybe even had more of a reaction after that. So what would be a compensatory strategy? So a child comes up with a new ending for that, what could have been a happy event, what could have been, pleasant, or what could have been even a little bit traumatic. So a child might come up with a different ending here. So when you see him start to play doctor with his doll or his character there, he might come up with something like he sees the nurse or the doctor or whoever coming with the shot, and he has the doll or the character run away, or he has them say, "No, get out of here," or something like that. And again, that's when you see that, that's him starting to change how the storyline went. And sometimes we introduce that too early. And even as SLPs, as we're playing on play skills, one of the things that we try to do sometimes is add a surprise or add something that's unexpected there. But see, kids aren't really going to be able to do that until they're here at this developmental level. So I wanted to mention that because some of you that you've used that strategy and you're kind of expecting a child to be able to do that when he's again, 2.5, and when he's just not there yet. This comes in between 3 and 4. But it's great when you start to see it and you think, oh my goodness, he's really trying to consolidate that experience there, and we see his language advancements because he's able to use the words there to let you know, hey, I'm handling this a different way. If we want to get kind of all psychological there and really analyze that. But it certainly is something that we see kids do. They start to modify an original outcome. The second play skill is that children engage in evolving episode sequences that are unplanned. Now, I may have given you the impression in the last show, if you've been watching the shows sequentially, and we talked about at stage 7, that children did start to plan their play because they were using more pieces. And sometimes you would see them, when they are looking for something as they are playing, start to use something symbolically for something that they need, that they maybe think they need a real life prop for and they can't find it, so they just start to pretend. And so with that, sometimes I gave the example that you're playing with the child and they go get something that is just perfect that they've remembered from a previous play experience, or something that they've come up with it cognitively as they're playing with you. That doesn't mean that they're really planning play, and again, we kind of get to this more toward the end of this, and beyond this series, when children are 4 or 5, we're cutting off stages of play here for the purposes of the podcast here at 4, because that's the majority of our audience here, therapists and parents who work with children that are maybe even in that preschool range, but 4 is kind of our outer limit there. But it's when they get there, when they really start associative play and start really planning, that's when you're going to see them at the beginning of play think, oh, we're going to play cowboys today. And so when we play cowboys, we need a hat, we need a horse, and they start to kind of think what all they're going to pull together to play that. That's the kind of planning that happens when children are older. And that's not really planning when they kind of come up with it on their own, kind of spur of the moment. And so I wanted to make that distinction to be sure that you're understanding that. So let me give you an example, and this is one of Dr. Westby's examples. She says that a child might pretend to make a cake, bake it, wash the dishes, and then he suddenly goes to check the patient. This sounds like lots of moms, right? We all have a ton of things going on. He switches gears and goes and checks on his patient. He calls the ambulance, and then he takes the patient to the hospital. And so again, what she's saying here is that those episodic sequences of pretend play, they kind of, even though they're going to sequence 3 or 4 things in a row, they may switch really quickly to another theme that they were doing before, or just something prompts them to think, oh, this would be a good idea. Let me switch over here and do this. And so that's why she's saying that things are unplanned. The next play skill here is they transform themselves into a role. And so they've been building up to this. And again, if you've been following along with this series, in the last stage, which was 2.5 to 3, I was trying to think of the months, 30 to 36 months, they did start to talk to dolls and start to really use dolls or characters as a little playmate. And so you would see a child, take a doll along, or again, start to really specifically include them. And the doll is the star of the play, star of the show there. Now kids are really putting themselves, and not just as the kind of quote-unquote star or centerpiece. They've already been that, but now they become something else to pretend to be the star there and take that primary role. And so dress up becomes super fun at this stage, because it really supports a child's ability to kind of even, as we would start to say here, as an educator would say, use his imagination. And so what's he doing? He's just really thinking about what he wants to be and how he could play here. And then he's using, again, dress up really supports that because it helps children transform into those other roles. So it becomes, dress up also here becomes a lot more meaningful than if you had tried to do it at 2. Now at 2, if a little girl put on a princess outfit, she might have just wanted to look in the mirror and listen to her mom tell her how pretty she is and kind of prance around and maybe, put on other accessories with it. She puts the dress on and then she wants the crown and then she wants the rings and then she wants to put on the, pretend little pumps and just walk around and maybe even get a little purse. And you might even support her and say something like, oh, are you going to Disney World now? Or are you going to your castle? Or will you go find the prince? Or, don't say that. But, anything like that. You might say those kinds of things to a little girl. But here at 3, between 3 and 4, she really pretends to be the princess. So she's initiating those things. And she's coming up with her own little plot and storyline. And so that's what we mean by transforms self into role. All right, number 4, the 4th play skill here is carries out pretend activities with replica toys and then makes the toys or uses the toys to do the activities. So now children have been playing with bigger sets, and we think that they're doing that or we're doing that for them just because of that choking hazard and we can't give them small parts, and that is certainly part of it. But now a child is able to take a pretend play toy like a dollhouse, and the pieces can be smaller now, and they really enjoy that kind of play. And really, instead of needing the bigger life-size teapot, and it's not to say that they're still not going to play with the life-size props, because you're going to see a ton of those kinds of examples that are still completely developmentally relevant and appropriate, because we're just talking about a 3-year-old, right? But here they start to really enjoy those, again, those smaller items, and they're able to carry out those pretend activities with the same level of participation and motivation. They're just as excited about playing with those smaller things and they understand it now versus the bigger kind of life-size thing. So that's something that happens here at stage 8. The 5th play skill that we're going to look at here at this level is uses lots of representational play. Now we've talked about this development in the last couple of play stages, but now it's established. And so remember those examples that we've talked about. A child can take a stick and maybe, it's a comb, and then he can pretend that it's a sword and then maybe stir with it. And again, it's not going to be like that as he's playing, but certainly you might see that happen over the course of an afternoon as he plays, or over the course of a few days. You can see that kind of symbolism. Now as children play together, you'll start to see them use kind of that group think with this. One child says something like, let's play choo-choo trains, or we need to ride a train to go visit the captain. Whatever the storyline happens to be. And somebody comes up with the idea of, hey, let's push all these chairs together and make a train. And so again, that symbolism is continuing to develop, and they do use more and more when they use one object to represent another object. Now, another skill that happens here at stage 8 is that children really start to use blocks again symbolically, and they start to even build structures. And so here, let's look at that progression. Children have been stacking blocks for a long time by the time they get to be 3 years old, right? And at the earliest stages of play, remember, we would stack the blocks up for them so that they can knock them down. And after they watch that for days or weeks or months or however long it turned out to be, they begin to be able to stack the blocks too. They didn't just mouth the blocks anymore or look at them or turn them over. They started to really stack the blocks, and we called a lot of that non-functional play. And we haven't talked about blocks a lot, but certainly beyond that, but certainly children have used them throughout toddlerhood. And so now here at 3, because they've become symbolic and because they're doing even more and more representational play, they start to build things with those blocks. So now they may be playing with some farm animals and decide, hey, we need a pen, or we need to build a fence. We've got to hold all these pigs in here if they're playing with a little set like that. And so they start to look for something. What can we use? What can I use? I don't have the real fence here. And so they build that. And so you'll start to see that sort of thing happen in all kinds of play. They may build a garage for their truck while they're playing. They may build a swimming pool. I like to get kids to try try to, think of something new, of a new play idea, especially if they've already done it. If they've had it's not going to make much sense if they've never seen a swimming pool or had much experience with that, but they probably have. And so again, just that next little rung up in development of playing with those blocks, and now because they know how to pretend, they know how to use one object to represent another object, they start to become symbolic with that. And so I love that, and I hope throughout this whole series that's what you've really started to think about. When a kid doesn't have a skill at one level, why is that? It's because he's missed something in the previous levels. So we have to back up and teach him how to do those other things that he's missed so that he can get to those higher level skills. The seventh skill that we want to look at here is that children pretend observed events in which the child was not an active participant. Now, we've talked about that a little bit when back in the last stage we used a lot of examples like a firefighter. And so a child has never been a firefighter, and he's probably never been to a fire, right? But he probably has seen the fire trucks driving down the road, or he's driven by the fire station, or maybe even he's been at daycare or preschool and the fire truck has come, or you have taken him to a little child-friendly fair and they've had firefighters or police officers come and talk to children because that's so fun for them. Now they do pretend though and take on those things that they don't have complete one-to-one representational experiences. Like now you'll not be able to track down, like, where did he learn that? Where did he see that? Now they start to really make inferences, and they're able to reason a little bit. And again, so that cognitive development is really moving there, and they're really getting new skills. And so you start to see that in play, and you think, where did he come up with that? It's because he's learning and he's applying his new knowledge. And so again, he's able to start to do things that he hasn't necessarily seen anybody do yet, which is so exciting. The eighth play skill here is that children assign roles to other children. So as they're talking to kids and as they're getting ready to play, they might say something like, I'll be the mommy and you be the baby. Or let's say they're going to play ice cream shop, and I'm going to show you a darling ice cream set later when we look at the recommended toys. But he'll start to say, you buy the ice cream and I'll work at the ice cream shop. And so again, they start to tell other children. They're not only deciding for themselves, hey, I'm going to take on this new role here. As they're moving toward 4, they start to say that to other children and let them know what they should be as they're playing together. The ninth skill here is negotiates play with others. And so that really works into assigning roles. Maybe the other child says, I don't want to be the baby. I'm not going to be the baby. I'm not going to play if I'm the baby. And again, it may not be quite that advanced, but then maybe the first child says, okay, I'll be the baby, you be the daddy, or you be the mommy, or you be the teacher. And so they start to negotiate. Again, we see sharing really be a big deal to happen between 3 and 4. And one thing that makes that really easier for children is because here at this stage, the people become even more important than the objects or what they're playing. So because they've gotten into that associative play, and as they move toward cooperative play, they really enjoy the experience. And so it would be more important for them to learn how to negotiate and to learn how to play and have these, it's not a big deal. They just want to play with the other kids. So if a kid says, I don't want to be the bad guy, I want to be the cop, or I want to be the police officer, then the other kid says, okay, no big deal, I'll do that. And so that negotiation comes in there. The 10th skill here is uses multiple reversible roles. And so let's pretend that a child is playing airplane, or they're taking a trip and they're talking about flying on an airplane. So a kid might be the person who sells the ticket, or checks them in on the plane, and then he pretends that he's going to be the pilot, and then he pretends that he's the flight attendant. And again, this all depends on a child's previous experiences. So remember, that's still going to be a part of it. And we just set up in skill number 7, that they might pretend observed events in which they haven't actually participated. But please know that you are still going to have to give and help a child with those foundational pieces there. So a child's not going to be able to pretend to be on an airplane if he's, if his only idea of airplane is I hold it in my hand and fly it around, or mom points up in the sky and shows me that big airplane. There's still going to need to be, some in between there. So that's the multiple reversible roles. And so you might see a child again when let's say they're playing kitchen and they're making the cake and they're getting ready to feed the baby the cake, and then they decide, somehow they shift, and then they're the daddy coming home from work and they decide they want a piece of the cake, or they're another friend who comes in, or whatever. So my point here is they're going to take on different roles even within the same play scheme. You're going to see them want to do that. Number 11 is the child talks for the doll or the puppet or character that he's using in play. And back in stage 7, now what did we say? That a child starts to use a doll or a character as a playmate, and so that the child would talk to the doll or the character. Now they're talking for the doll or the puppet and making them talk back. And so you'll see a child maybe use this even with 2 toys as they're playing. He'll make this guy talk, and then he makes this guy talk, and then he makes this guy talk, and then this guy talk. And so that really probably doesn't happen until first, as they're playing with a doll or a character. Let's say that Thomas is a child's just favorite toy, Thomas the train. And so he's played with Thomas, he's carried Thomas around, you see him playing trains all the time. He makes a big deal about wanting to take Thomas with him when he gets in the car. And he's talked to Thomas, but now he's going to make Thomas respond. So again, that's that next little level of the whole continuum here of just moving on up and doing what that next little expected part would be. The next skill is very similar to that. He takes reciprocal roles with dolls. And so again, same thing. Same kind of thing there. That really is sort of the same skill. All right, so those were the language skills there. Let's move on, those were the play skills from 36 months to 3 to 3.5. So now let's go from 3.5 to 4. So here, and again, this is a lot of information. Let's just breeze through these right here. So uses language to invent props and set the scene. And so again, that's a really important, not only a language skill, but a play skill here. And we said that we've already started talking about that, how kids move toward that where they're really talking about what they're about to do. And so that's the planning piece here as well. They build those 3-dimensional structures with blocks, and so they move that up a little more so that they are between 3.5 to 4. Those structures get a little more realistic. They start to maybe try to put a roof on the house or add more details there so that you can see, oh, he used to build a fence like this or a pen, but now look what he does. He doesn't just put the animals in there. He's building the fence, he's building the gate. He wants a gate to open. Or again, something that would make it more realistic. And so you'll see more details here. If he's built just a little swimming pool before, he may have another structure that goes with that, or maybe a diving board or something with it. So just something that it looks a little bit more realistic. You can tell, oh, I can see that's what that is. And again, a little bit more detail. Number 3 here, they improvise and vary the pretend play themes. And so we talked about that they might do those compensations, and you'll see it even more and more. So it's not just the ending that's changed. They change out different roles. They add new characters. They add new actions as they're playing something. Number 4, they plan varied scripts and schemes with counterfactual thinking. So they start to pretend more. And this is Carol Westby's example. It's so cute. I'm just going to use it. A child might say, I'm the mom, and I'm going to cook this dinner called pizza, marshmallows, and coffee soup. And so you start to see that imaginative play come in. And so again, they're really, really pretending there because they've never had coffee soup there. They've come up with that on their own. Number 5, they hypothesize. And so what does that mean? You start to think about possibilities. What would happen if? Or like I said, they add a new character there. Or they start to think as they're planning their play, or even as they're playing with their little friends, certainly at this age, what would, or this stage, what if my friend does this? Let's change it this way. So again, that jump in cognitive development. The next one organizes by telling what will happen. And so you'll see that narration, and it's something they've heard us do, and now they start to do it. So something like, since I'm the fireman, I get to spray the hose. Or since I'm the doctor, I get to take your blood pressure. And they get out their little blood pressure cuff from the doctor kit. And so they're narrating. And again, that shows that planning piece. They use dolls and puppets to act out scripts and schemas. And so here, this is what I said back in the previous example when I said that a child is talking to the doll, and then he talks back as he's the doll. He does that reciprocal role change. Now they start to do it with two characters. And so they take, say, as they're playing with a Fisher-Price firehouse set, they talk as the firefighter and then maybe as the mommy who they're coming to save her. The house is on fire and he's coming to save them. So he might start to talk like he's also it takes on that role too. So you start to see them use the two little characters there, and they're everybody in that stage. And that's the last one. They take on multiple roles, and then they assign multiple roles to the doll. So now the child might be the firefighter, the dad, and the husband, and then the doll might be the baby and then another firefighter, or may be the person getting rescued from the house. And so you can see those different roles as they take on different things there. All right, so those were play skills. All of those, I think that's 16 or 17 different skills that happen between 3 and 4. Now let's take a look at the language development. Here for language skills between 3 and 4, we're going to use the same kind of categorization that Dr. Westby uses, and she divides all of her language skills into 2 big categories. And so first she looks at the function or the pragmatics for language development, and then she looks at form and content. So the syntax, the grammar, the vocabulary. So let's divide it down into those categories too, because again, just like play skills, this is a lot of information to do at one time. So all that a child learns language-wise between 3 and 4. So let's go ahead and divide it like that. And remember, this is going to be a lot easier for you if you are following along with a handout. So if you haven't gotten that yet, please get it, or at least at the end of the show, go back and get it so you'll have all of this to be able to refer to. So let's look at function from 3 to 3.5. So here, the first thing, a child uses language, and that's what function is. What does a child do with all those words? What's the purpose? To report, to predict, and attempt to narrate or tell a story. So these were the new things that are happening with language. So he's starting to use words again differently. It's not all about what's going on right in front of him. He's really thinking about, with predictions, what's going to happen in the future here. I'm going to tell you, and remember, and I don't mean future like my 10-year plan, a 3-year-old is going to say. I mean when they're starting to tell another child or you what they want to do with play. And so remember when I gave that previous example a few minutes ago, the child is saying, hey, since I'm the fireman, I get to spray the fire hose. And so a child might do that again as he's starting to think about, oh, what am I going to need to play here, or what's going to happen with play here, that kind of prediction. Or it could just be something like, again, what new little compensatory thing, what new ending is he going to add to the play scheme today? So let's say that let's don't go on. There's a time, I won't give you examples. We'll talk about this more when we do the toys. I could talk about this all day. We better just keep going. All right, so that was use this language to report, predict, and attempt to narrate or tell a story. Number 2, gives dialogue, including projected desires, thoughts, and feelings to dolls and puppets. So remember, we said that kids were talking for puppets. So what are they talking about? So they may say what's going to happen, what they pretend that they are, the puppet or the doll or the character. They pretend that they're that, and they really take on that role. And so the child might say to the doll, you are hungry, so I will fix you something to eat. Or, oh no, don't be sad, baby. Your mommy's coming back. Or, don't be sad, baby. I'll get you a new balloon, or anything like that. And so you start to see, again, them thinking ahead, and then they use the words to explain what they're thinking. And this is such an exciting development when this happens, when you can really see that development, because now you're not just guessing, you're hearing them say the words. The third skill here is uses indirect request. So instead of asking mommy directly for the cookies, a child might say, Mommy lets me have cookies. And so they're not saying, Mommy, can I have a cookie? Or Grandma, can I have a cookie? They're telling you something indirectly, like, Mommy lets me do this. Or, they walk in the bedroom, and a child who plays with Dad roughhouses on the bed, but Mom doesn't normally like to do that. He might say, Dad lets me jump on the bed. And so, again, that indirect request, instead of saying, can I jump on the bed too? They're a little more mature and refined, and using much more complex reasoning instead of just asking that direct request. Number 4, a child begins to change speech depending on the listener. And so that's kind of their, like I said before, they might, as they're talking to a baby doll, use that special intonation. And I've given those examples where I'm talking like a child talking like the baby doll. And so that's sort of what they start to do here. Or they may talk differently. Let's say after preschool, they're so tired and they get in the car with Mom and cry, and they fall apart kind of. But if they were getting in the car with someone they didn't know, they're probably not going to act/talk in the same way, right? It's an unfamiliar person, unfamiliar situation. They're not going to do the same kinds of things. So they start to code switch here, even at 3. All right, number 5, they use reasoning by integrating reports, predictions, projections, and information. So what are they doing? They're starting to consolidate all that information during play, using the things that they've learned previously, and then thinking, last time I played this, we did this, and taking that kind of into account, and again changing it, or making those predictions. But this could happen this time. I want this. I don't want to play the same kind of way. Let's do something different. And again, these are not things that they're going to say to you outright, but as you're listening and watching, you can certainly see that children are starting to think about what will happen during play and then change their behavior based on that. Number 6, a language skill here at this developmental level, is that a child uses meta-communicative strategies to indicate how language should be interpreted. So remember, meta always means what? About, and so communicative. So they're doing things that are give you some additional information about how you should perceive and respond to what they're talking about. So an example, like they use different intonation, like we said, when they're doing baby doll talk and they're talking to their baby, they might talk real sweet, or use that motherese like we do with them, right? And so that's what they're doing there. That's a meta-communicative strategy. They might use some different facial expressions. So let's say they use a pouty face when they're talking about something they want or something that they're sad about. You start to see them use some different kinds of facial expressions there. It might be that they use a gesture. And again, what is all this to do? It's to supplement what they're saying so you understand, and especially in pretend play, that they're taking on a different role. They may take on, the role of a mom or dad, say, even scolding a pet, no, doggy, bad dog. And, you're hearing their tone of voice, you're seeing their facial expression, you're making a grimace, like they're mad, and then, using a gesture like that. So that's a meta-communicative or communicative, however you want to say it, strategy there. So that's pretty sophisticated, right, for a 3-year-old? It certainly is. The next skill here, let's go on to their form and content between 3 and 3.5. So these are the more milestone-y things that speech language pathologists would focus on. And we talked about this in the introduction. Their verbs really expand. And so now they use past tense. And so I saw the spider. I ate the banana. I walked outside. And so in those examples, you had irregular past tense. And remember, in the preview for the show, or the introduction, we talked about that it would be really common past tense verbs that they start to do at the beginning. And then you certainly start to see Even with those regular past tense verbs, a child may add ed on an ending for a verb that doesn't need an ed on it. So I used the example already. I eat a popsicle yesterday instead of I ate a popsicle yesterday. A child might say I eated a popsicle. And what happens when they do that? What do we know? We know that they're marking past tense. They're just overgeneralizing that rule for regular past tense verb acquisition, which would be in real language putting an ed on the end of that, because that's how we make most of our verbs past tense, right? And so you start to see those irregular verbs emerge too, because mom corrects them and says, you didn't eat that yesterday, you ate that. You ate a popsicle yesterday. Yesterday you ate your banana. You ate chicken yesterday. Today you will eat, and talk about that. And so that's how kids learn grammar. And so certainly we start to see that here with verbs, and that's one of the first kind of modifications that we'll see with those specific tenses there. They also use future tense, and remember in the introduction I said that sort of sounds like what we would consider slang. So I gonna wash the dishes. I wanna go to Mama's house tomorrow. So those kinds of future tense verb representations start to show up too. They also have expanded descriptors. So these are going to be our adjectives, so our words that describe something. So related to shape, size, color, texture, and spatial relationships. So we start to see kids really use color words and really use words to represent shape. So give me the round one, or I like the bumpy book, or whatever they're going to say there. They start to get some new adjectives that again describe things. They're not just saying, give me the book or give me the whatever. They're using more language to describe what they want and in their everyday conversations. Because they're using language to talk about something, remember we call that the meta-communicative. Now they also use meta-linguistics. So now they're using words to talk about language. And so an example of that would be, Mommy said no shoes in the house. Or if they're playing with something or playing with a little group of friends, one little friend might say to another friend, he said we go to the playground, or something like that. Or in play it would be something like, if they're playing cops and robbers, he said he's the bad guy. He's the robber now. And so again, using words to talk about language. She told me. And so those are good examples of that. And then metacognitive skills. So they're starting to what? Talk about what they think about. So words like I know, I wonder, I remember. So remember we said those were those three things there: metacognitive, metalinguistic, and metacommunicative. And so isn't that just so advanced? I mean, especially when you're a birth to three SLP primarily, and you start to really think about even those kinds of things as language develops. No wonder we love this job so much. There's always something so exciting to think about, right? So those were our skills right there. Let's talk about function between 3.5 and 4. So a child here with language, and we've already said this previously, so this is just that next little step. So here they use the language to take on the role of characters during play. So for example, if they're playing pirates, they might start to talk like a pirate during play. So, I, matey, I'm going to make you walk the plank. Or say something that's super, super in character. So not only the intonation, not only their gestures, they also change the words and start to use the vocabulary of the character that they would take on. And we see that too, even when they're pretending to use a play theme from one of their favorite shows. And so they're pretending to be Peppa Pig, or they're pretending to be one of the Paw Patrol characters, or even something more generic. They're pretending to be the teacher at school. They start to say things that would be specific to that character. They also use language to direct play. So as we said before when we were reviewing the play skills, that they took on more of a role of assigning roles in play to other children. they also use the language to do that. So now a child may be more like a stage manager, where he steps out of character, even in the middle of play, to direct other children and say, no, you have to move that over here. So again, they're able to take those steps in and out of their roles and use the words. Number 3, they use language to act as the author of the play story. So they may completely change the storyline, and so tell the child kind of what to do on the fly as they're playing. Another form content that we talked about back in the introduction is using conjunctions. And so words like we said, and, if, but, so, and because, and that makes their either part of the sentence longer, so they're using like a compound subject there. So something like the mommy and the daddy will, or remember we said they could even use it with the verb. They could do, the doggy went to sleep and then woke up. And so, with that, they're combining that verb part of that sentence with that conjunction. And then, like I already gave that example of, they can use conjunctions to make compound sentences and join two sentences together. They now use those helping or auxiliary verbs that would express necessity or possibility. So what do we mean by that? Words like can, could, may, might, and would. And so again, that's not only a language skill there. What are they doing? They're planning, and they're projecting as they use some of those things. We said that they start to hypothesize as well. That was one of the play skills that they start to do. So the language skills now will help them do that. They're also language-wise answering some why and how questions now that require reasoning and logic. And remember we said what the biggest thing that happens language-wise between 30 months and 36 months was that children started to ask and answer lots of WH questions, but we said that why, they would mostly start to ask why questions there before they're 3, but not even necessarily attend to the response. It just kind of becomes just a little automatic. They're not even able to, again, want to hear the reason. And developmentally, they just haven't been able to get there yet. They kind of started this process by asking the question. Now they understand it. So now they're maybe able to give you some answers to questions, especially, we're talking about play here. But, why did the baby cry? Why is the baby so sad? They may come up with a reason for that. And remember, we just gave an example back a minute ago when we said that a child would start to talk for a character. So this is, and project his feelings on the character, or project what he thinks is going to happen. So again, can't you see how this is all connected and this all goes together? So certainly those questions there. All right, I mentioned this during our last show, and I want to say it again. If you need help teaching these specific kinds of words, and this would be particularly what we've talked about with the form and the content. So the specific vocabulary words or the specific forms, like today we talked about verb tenses, and we've talked about conjunctions, but I haven't talked a lot about how to teach those. I've got all of that information in my Language Milestones podcast series, as well as in my therapy manual, Teach Me to Talk, the therapy manual. So if you need the specifics with how we're going to teach those helping verbs or new descriptors, this manual is what's going to help you do that. That's kind of beyond the scope of today's show. That series begins at show 450 back of the 12-month level, and then we walk all the way through the 48th-month level, just like we've done here with this play series. And so the shows in the range from 3 to 4, 36 months to 48 months would be number 460, 461, 462, and 463. So if you need ideas for teaching those specific words that we mentioned, please take a look at those shows, because they will help you and give you more specific ideas that are frankly just beyond, like I said, the scope of this show today. Now let's talk about activities and strategies. In stage 8 here, our primary purpose is to help children learn to do what? Is to take on early roles and to do some early pretending with peers. So let's just take a minute and think about this and discuss it a little bit. So what that looks like when we're working on play skills. What are we actually supposed to do? So I'm going to give you just some really simple, concrete activities and strategies that will help you facilitate these areas for play skill development in 3 to 4 year olds. So number one, we said with early roles. What's our best way to help a child take on an early role? Talking about that with them, coming up with the ideas, but what did we say? Physically providing that prop. So dress up will help. So when you have a child that has difficulty taking on roles, or even a child who has a lot of difficulty learning how to shift roles, and let's just say that he doesn't get to the point that he pretends that he is anything except let's just use an example we've already been using. He only wants to play firefighter. When you're playing firefighter, he only wants to be the firefighter. Now, let me just say there's nothing wrong with that. And we don't want everything that we do with the child, even in the context of a therapy session, to be about, you're going to do what I say. And we're going to only take the creative directions that I, as the therapist, or I, as the mom, allow you to take. You don't want to do that. And certainly if a child is kind of wants to be the firefighter, that's great. But if he's stuck being the firefighter because he doesn't realize that he can be the other characters, that's where early dress up can help. So that will help him shift roles. We talked about another big thing here is that a child is able to vary outcomes in play. And so I gave this idea as an early strategy back in the previous show, 472, but let's talk about it again here at 473. What can you do for a child who doesn't ever want to vary an outcome in play? You change your response. So change how you would normally play. And so remember, I gave this example back too. We said sometimes we do this a lot too early, and then a kid can't really get it yet, or he's too surprised, he doesn't know how to respond. Here between 3 and 4, he's supposed to be able to come up with these new endings and new variations. And so if a kid never does that, you've got to introduce that. Now, sometimes kids don't do that because they are inflexible or maybe rigid in their expectations, and we see that sometimes with our little friends on the autism spectrum, and that's certainly something that we have to help them do, is move beyond and try something else and take on something new. And so that's how it would look here in play, that a kid just wants to do the same thing over and over and over and over. And it's not because sometimes it is because that's his total preference, but as we can, we need to help a child be able to move on and include some different variations, just so, again, that he's a little bit more flexible in play, because, we all have to be flexible in everyday life, right? Everything doesn't always go as we plan. So when we introduce these variations and when we help children, again, get on the road to being able to change some of those, even in the context of play skill development, change some of those things, we have to introduce that different role or different outcome as we're playing. So let's just take that zoo example. We talked about playing with zoo animals last show, because that would be a great way to expand play. And remember, we talked about that we were, maybe going beyond our farm animals or the pets or whatever. We've played with the child and introducing something new. And so now we're going beyond that we're not only going to introduce a new kind of material to play with or a new play theme. Now we're going to make that new play theme have variations and expansions. So during play with the zoo, if you have pretended with the child that the child is just going to the zoo and you're seeing the animals and whatever you make them do, now just add more steps. So maybe make the animals run away. Maybe pretend that a storm is coming. Maybe pretend that the elephant has a tummy ache and you've got to call the doctor. And a doctor for animals is called a vet. And so see how you're going to be able to introduce new vocabulary with that just by adding some new play routines and play actions. You can pretend like they run out of food. You can pretend like a truck comes and crashes into the zoo and all the animals are displaced, anything like that. The door on the cage is broken. Just come up with any new thing that you can in play, especially, and that's fun for all of our kids that we play with, but especially when we start to see that a child becomes really stuck and kind of fixated on these things. And again, is this to kind of change who they are and their intrinsic on their own ideas? Are we trying to make them less, less able to play what they want to play? No, we're just helping them expand their play skills and giving them some new themes and some new language. All right, so other things we can do to make this more successful. Play with sets. And so we talked about how children here between 3 and 4 are really physically able to handle play with smaller items because they're no longer mouthing everything. And remember, that change should have happened more around 24 months rather than 36 months. But here at 36 months to 48 months, they are able to play with those smaller sets with more and more pieces. And I'm going to show you some great examples of those toys. But really play with those. You're not just doing 1 or 2 things and then putting those toys away. Stay with that for a while. And remember, we've said in the last few shows that we want kids to add more and more steps. Remember, we started back, just with 2 steps back there at 24 months. And here at 3 to 4, we want kids, sequencing, 4, 5, 6, as many steps as they can sequence, certainly by the time they're 4. Another thing that we can do in therapy to make these play skills, to target these play skills, is talk for the doll. So remember, we said that a child starts to talk to the doll back in stage 7. Well, here at stage 8, we want him talking for the doll. So a great way for us to facilitate that is for us to talk for the doll. And so we would start to say things like, the baby says, I want to go play on the swings. And again, we talked about using the gestures, using the intonation changes, using the word that. So let's do it like this. Let's say what the baby would say. Mama, Mama, swing, swing. So that would be a better example of that. It's when a child even changes the words that he would use, for that play idea. So do that. Talk for the doll. And then to help the child, what should you say? You should say something like, what will your baby say? Or what would the daddy say? Or whatever that is. You're giving those cues to tell a child what to do there, and just really to provide what should come next. The next thing we can do, build structures with blocks. And so again, we're going to help children become more symbolic, and we're going to talk about it in play. And you can do something where you're sort of leading them to come into that idea on their own, as they're playing with a group of animals. Let's go back to our zoo example. You might say, well, look at your giraffe. He needs a place to stay or he's going to run away. What can we do? What can we do for that giraffe? How can we keep him from running away? How can he stay right here? And so when we talk about that, you're generating that idea for the child so that he has a reason to build that structure with blocks. So that's a great thing to do. Another thing we can do, that's a big one here between 3 and 4, is really facilitate that next level of cooperative and associative play with other kids. So let's just say associative play, because that's kind of what comes in first. And remember that associative play is just that we are finally playing together. We may not be completely cooperating yet, but all of us are playing the same thing, and we're talking about it, and we're interacting and staying on this. And so what can we do with that? Well, when our children can't do that at all, they have to do that with another adult first. And then I like to add another child, not just one-on-one where we kind of stick a child in a room with another child and say, go, because that's probably not going to be very successful. Or they fall back into just that parallel play. And again, if you have a child who's never done parallel play, where let's say you've had a child who's on the autism spectrum, that he's just at the periphery of the room. So when he's in a space with another child, he's still, because of his own self agenda, he's still playing by himself, and he's still, even if you put him in a room with another child by himself and don't say a word, he still may not ever interact with that other child. So you've got to provide some help there and some support. And so a child has to learn how to play with an adult first, sometimes, before they're even able to know what the expectations are, as far as the joint play and the reciprocity and the back and forth. And so, that's really what speech therapy is, right? We've been doing that all along. Let's say that you've seen a child since he turned 2, and now he's 3.5, and you're kind of working on this, and he's still not really at the stage where he can play with other kids yet. you facilitate that, not, first by doing that kind of play as another child would be doing with him, but then by adding another child with you and with that other support. You can do it in a group program, and we see this all the time in preschool when we fold our kids into public school preschool programs that don't have only children with developmental needs, when there are some conceivably typically developing children within that classroom. We can do it like that. Or if you have the opportunity to be able to set up some little play dates and set up some opportunities where you do some even little dyad treatments, and so you treat one child with another child. And when we had our clinic in Kentucky, we did that a lot, where I was able to really pull in, one child with another child, and both their moms were there too. And so we were really, really able to facilitate this kind of play and work on those kinds of things. So that might be something you would do too. All right, so let's talk about what to do for kids who aren't there and kind of this progression. Now, this is not on your handout. I just want to talk to you about this. And then I'll give you a specific podcast to go listen to about this so you can get some more information. So we're going to kind of breeze through it right now, but I want you to have this hierarchy and this sequence, because like I said with that previous example, you can't just throw a kid who's totally just not able to interact with other kids yet. He's really kind of self-absorbed. And again, I don't want to focus on it just from a deficit-based perspective, but that's what it is. And he's just doing his own thing, and he's not really able to socialize and to communicate with other children yet. You can't just expect them to get there without some steps in between. So let me kind of run through this with you, and then again I'll share that resource for you so you can go get more information about this sequence. So and certainly we could start to do some of these things before a child turns 3, but it didn't really fit into this stage of play podcast series before now, because now is when kids are supposed to be able to do it. So let's just talk about what we would do for a child who even earlier we identified this may be an issue for. So we said, number 1, target engagement with adults first, and we already talked about that we're going to introduce things with that child where we as the adult are playing with that child to again get them, teach them how to interact and have that reciprocal response, even if it's nonverbal, here with another person. So we're going to target that engagement first. I like to use social games for this at the beginning, and I'm kind of known for social games, but that's where we start with kids. And so certainly when we have a kid who isn't ever really kind of cooperatively playing with us, introducing physical play in the context of social games like throwing him up in the air or playing chase or jumping on the bed. And those actions are really, really regulating, so they get him in a better place to be able to interact with us and engage with us and communicate with us. And so those physical social games will do that. Then we kind of move to regular social games like peekaboo and patty cake and the things that you typically think of as baby games. And sometimes I'll get an email back from a parent who will say something like, I was so disappointed when I got your book, Teach Me to Play With You, because those games, we've been playing those games for a long time. And then it says, and then, or they'll say, I tried that a while ago and it didn't work. And then I tried him again and I followed those specific steps, and he was a different child with me. He tried to stay with me. He tried to get me to play the games again. He didn't run away from me. He didn't avoid me anymore. This became fun and enjoyable for us. And so again, here my point is sometimes we have to back way up to meet a child where he really, really is socially. And so that's really, really important part here for kids who, again, who aren't playing with other kids. Don't start with just throwing them into other kids. Start with that one-on-one interaction with an adult. And so I'm going to walk you through again what to do as the adult there. Number two, we've got to, after we've done that and we've gotten a child really, really engaged with playing with us, and so that consistency is there where he stays with us more, we maintain the same activity, we're sharing that experience, he's responding to me, he's initiating with me, we both know that we're doing the same thing. That's kind of the first step. The second step, and this is where we start to think about other kids, is that we start to build awareness of other children. Remember, we call that specifically with play skills. This is how we're talking like an early interventionist or a developmental therapist now, onlooker play. So this is where we point out the other kids, where when our only goal for a kid that day really might be, hey, when we're out on the playground, I just want him watching other kids more. I just want him at least sometime to be aware that other children are out here too. Or you're in a gym with a child and he usually just wants to throw the ball repetitively against the wall because that's where he is sensory wise. Well, even if he's doing that, we can still help him begin to, sometimes we can, but our goal should be to help him begin to even notice the other children, to look at other children as he's doing that, or when his ball goes away. If another child comes to retrieve the ball and give it to him, that might be a situation that we set up where we coach another child to get the ball and then to give it to him. And again, that's to provide that opportunity for him to notice that other child and to start to watch that other child. Or if we see that he's a little bit interested in other children with what they're doing, he starts to watch them on the swings. We really stop and help him do that, and we provide that language that would help him be able to stand there for a minute and really process watching those other children play. So that's a big step with this too. The next thing that we want to do is help a child join in those little early play experiences when he can. And remember, we said that first happens with what? With parallel play. That they are doing the same thing, but they're not necessarily talking or doing anything other than both occupying the same space and doing the same thing. And so we see kids do that, like when they're playing, let's say they're going to a play place that has trampolines and ball pits, a little gym. That's something that we want kids to do. Jump on the trampoline with other kids. Or, when he's in the ball pit throwing balls, we don't want him to scramble away. When another child comes and approaches him, we want him to stay there. So help him join in. So when another child has routinely, that's been his experience, what he does, another kid gets in the bounce house and he's out. Help him find a reason to stay in there and a way to join in. Now, I think gross motor play is the best way to do that. So in the little bouncy house, that would be just starting to jump with other kids, or in a ball pit, it would just be not leaving. And if the other kids are just, throwing themselves in the ball pit and digging around with their hands, that's what you would want your little friend to do too. So help them join in that gross motor play. My best clinical activity for this would be as if you have a group of children, get something going like a running game. And so if you're outside on the playground and you have 2 or 3 kids that are kind of hanging out with you, and even the kids that you're not supposed to see, right? And they're kind of hanging out with you because you're fun and you talk to them, and you can use those kids there and you can say, hey, let's play a game. And so you have those kids there with you plus your little friend that you're working with, and you can say, let's all run to the tree. Ready? We're going to run to the tree. And then you all run to the tree and you run with them. You are not just the teacher or the coach in this experience. You're going to be a real play partner. So you're going to run together and everybody's going to put their hand on the tree, and then you're all going to stand there together and laugh and look at each other, and then you're going to say, let's run to, and pick another milestone. The table. Let's all go to the table. You ready? Ready, set, go. And you all run to the table. Now, for your little friend, you're probably going to have to help them run. And keep them on track. So hold their hand, or kind of, if they will let you, without falling apart or creating a tantrum or a meltdown, help them, kind of guide them to run to the other place. And so that sort of gross motor play, in my experience, has been the first kind of thing that happens when a child has consistently not included other children in his play. The next kind of play that I do is a sensory play. So something like, and we've already talked about the gross motor, like the ball pit, or this is kind of the next little kind of continuum with play. So something like a sandbox or a water table, or If you're creating this experience, you may get a big plastic under the bed Rubbermaid container and fill it, with 20 bags of beans, until you get the whole bottom covered. But my point is, you want to have enough space for a child to play with another child together, and then give them something to do there. So sensory activities are a great way to promote that peer engagement at the earliest. And again, this is just right beyond that gross motor play. Try to do a sit down kind of sensory play activity with them. The next kind of play would be a small group or circle time activity, and use a strength for a child with this to really get them again to be able to want to stay and participate, or stay and play, as I say. So if they're a kid who likes to sing, who loves music, that's what you would do during circle time. If they're a kid who's really just kind of into they don't like singing, or you can do books. If there's a kid who's a really visual kid who loves story time, that would be something you would want to do there. Or maybe even something just like a really simple imitation game. Everybody's going to clap, everybody's going to kick, and that may be too high of a language level. I'm just trying to think about specific little niches or preferences that a child would like. So be sure to build that kind of into those early peer experiences, so that he is going to want to stay, and it's something that he's good at and enjoys. Because if you try to introduce something with a circle time activity with your purpose of having a child interact with, participate with, and watch other kids, don't do something that he hates or something that he's just not interested in it at all. Try to pick something with an activity preference or a strength for that child, so that you give him a reason to want to stay. The next one is kind of where we are now. It's up to the 6th step of facilitating peer interaction, and this is where we promote purposeful traditional play routines, like we dress up house cleaning or kitchen sets and construction sets like large cardboard blocks. I'm going to give you some ideas for that when we do the toys. But that's where we are. So you can see when we have a child who is to this point, there's a lot of other little steps or little milestones and skills that he has achieved along the way to get there. So my whole point with doing this, even though we don't have it on the handout, is just to tell you, don't start by throwing a child into this kind of play. If he's never interacted with other kids, even though we're here at the early role play stage, go back and try some of these earlier, easier activities first, because you're going to be a lot more successful. Now, the course where I've taught that specific sequence and talked about it, for a whole hour, is course number 412, Facilitating Peer Interaction, and I'll link that below if you're interested in that little sequence of teaching that. And the other thing you can do is to begin some early games, even some little board games. And I'm going to show you my favorite board games for 3 and 4-year-olds, or kids, even if they're a little bit younger than that are working into really trying to play with and make little friends and interact with other little same age peers. I'm going to show you some of those when we start the toy review. But that's what I wanted to talk about with activities and strategies, as far as what we need to be doing as the therapist or the adult to facilitate early role play or early pretending with peers. So now let's talk about the toys for here at stage 8, from 36 months to 48 months. So let me just say, I wanted to include about 50 toys here. But that would be way too long, right? And so I reduced it to just this minimal kind of amount. We're only going to address toys that will work toward the goals that we've mentioned already as focuses here for early role play and for pretending with peers. We also want to talk about what I've been mentioning the past couple of shows with the most universal play themes for kids here between 3 and 4. So in case you haven't caught that list yet, let me just go ahead and give it to you again. So preschoolers from 3 to, this is actually to 5, so that whole kind of preschool period, like to play variations of restaurant. And again, remember, these are pretend play themes, not overall play themes, but these opportunities for pretending. So any kind of thing that looks like restaurant play. So that would be like the pizza shop, the ice cream shop, a lemonade stand, a hot chocolate stand, a coffee shop. So any kind of little thing where the kid or somebody is the worker and somebody is the customer. So we'll talk about that. That's one of the universal play themes. The next one would be birthday party. So that's a really, really fun play theme for kids. The next one is an extension of farm play. So we talked about that farm play and farm animals and that sort of overall play theme with tractors and all things related to that kind of play is really popular with toddlers. And so then we said that all of these preschool themes usually are a step up from what a toddler interest or play theme was. And so anything like harvesting pumpkins or the apple orchard or any little special thing that you can think of with farm play, that would be a good idea for a 3 to 4 year old. The next one would be also an extension of our animal play, would be like a pet shop, or even the doctor play theme, which is still super popular with baby dolls and characters and people. Also kind of the animal aspect of that with playing with vets. So we talked about all the pretend play themes, even the toddler themes that we've mentioned in the past couple of episodes here in Stages of Play. But I talk about this in depthly in podcast 436 if you want to go back and listen to that and watch that course to give yourself some ideas for the specifics for playing restaurant, birthday party, Apple's Pet Shop, and doctor or vet. Okay, so now let's move on and let's look at the specific toys that we're talking about here for stage 8. And we're specifically going to talk about the play skills. I'm going to mention the language skills, but again, if you need those specific ideas for teaching, how do I teach verbs? How do I teach conjunctions? We're not going to be able to talk about that information because this show is already way too long. So get yourselves a copy of Teach Me to Talk, the therapy manual, or go back and listen to those podcasts that I already mentioned. Okay, so as we've been doing in the last several stages, when we're talking about our toys here, let's begin with puzzles. So here at stage ages 3 to 4, stage 8, kids are really ready for early jigsaw puzzles. So last time I gave you some examples for that in stage 7 with how to bump kids up. So now let's talk about a few more toys that are at that range or even a little higher. Now I remembered this toy right after I did the show last time when we were talking about early jigsaw puzzles and a way that you can introduce it, and I sort of started thinking about it, but this is an excellent toy for this. So this is actually a game, and we're going to be talking about other games. So this is a game that kind of does double duty. You could use it to work on early jigsaw puzzles like we're going to do here, but you can also use this as a group activity with several kids or even, just one of your little friends. Okay, so I like this for introducing the concept of jigsaw puzzles because it's so simple. There's just one piece that joins to another piece, and a child can really start to see as you're putting it on the table how to fit those together and push it. And so I think it's a fantastic way to introduce that. Now you can also target some other things with this game, which is why I really love it. Certainly it's fantastic for early literacy, right? Because you've got simple language here written so that, again, early readers and kids who are really getting interested in letters are naturally going to be attracted to this. And then just our typically developing kids, or just to, let me say it this way, to promote that interest that typically developing kids have with learning letters and, again, getting ready to read. This is a great game to kind of move you toward that. This is also a great game for our little friends who are already reading. So our little friends who are hyperlexic and they love letters and they're so interested in acquiring that. And again, I'm not going to teach a child how to read when he's 3, but if he's already reading, we certainly need to use that because that's one of his strengths. And so this is a great way to do it. And just the whole I Spy series, whether you're doing it with a book or even if you kind of take it beyond that and do it as your own little game that you play with a child, this is a really fun thing to do. So I know if you haven't seen these in a long time, you're going to naturally think, why have I not remembered to do this yet? This is a fantastic game here. So kids, again, you're just reading what you see on the left side and you have a child find it there on the other side of the puzzle. So great game for that, and I hope that you'll be able to use it. Okay, now let me show you a couple of Melissa and Doug puzzles. We are not going to be able to do a Stages of Play show without talking about Melissa and Doug toys, right? So let's go ahead and look at a couple of these wooden puzzles, and I think I showed you a similar puzzle in the show before this, 472. But let's just talk about how to do these puzzles. Now, these are traditional jigsaw puzzles, but of course at a very simple level. Last time we talked about some that had just 3 or 4 pieces, so go back and watch that show if you have a child that's having difficulty with these kind of pieces, because those were graded puzzle sets, and so you could start with puzzles that just had 2 or 3 pieces, and then again move up to 4, 5, 6. But this one is a little harder. I have no idea how many pieces this has, probably close to 12. You never just want, well, when you introduce this, especially to a kid that you're seeing for therapy, you don't want to just dump it out and say go. I do deconstruction with this, so meaning that you're just going to start where you have a child take the pieces out rather than put them in, so that would be a good idea. But I like to take out 1 or 2 pieces and then show a child, and then they can easily see what's missing. And so this is a really good kind of in-between step for a child to get ready to do a jigsaw puzzle. And so it's going to be a lot easier for him to pick, oh, let's look for this piece. What's right here? What do you see? What could that be? And help them, and you watch them as they are trying to pick the correct piece and kind of look for what comes next. And so describe it. You say, oh my goodness, this is brown and he has a black tail. Which one could that be? Which one is it? And it's a little hard for me to hold this up here now and you see it. But at the same time, this is how I want you to know how to work on it. And so, he's going to pick the one, and you say, oh goodness, look right here. What is that? That's the barn. Do you see a piece with the barn? Do you see a picture of the barn? And so that's how you help them walk through it. And so use those words and really, with the language here, help them really figure out. You're teaching them how to do it. So this is a great option, and I'll have some links for these little Melissa and Doug early jigsaw puzzles as well as some other ones. Now let's move on and talk about this more mature puzzle, and this is another Melissa and Doug set, and it's a set of blocks. I hope that you can see it here. So that means that this set has 6 different puzzles. And I haven't actually played with this with a child yet. I can't wait to do it. But here's what I want to do with this. Because you've got the different possibilities, if you're going to just give this to a child and say, go, there's no way that he's going to be able to figure this out. So you're going to have to really help them and talk about how many possibilities they're going to be for these little puzzles. And really, for therapy, for me, I'm going to get it all in the right starting set before we even begin, because if a child's trying to use pieces from the duck side to go in the cow side, it's just going to end up a big mess. So be structured with you when you're introducing these kinds of things. Talk to kids about oh look, how we can tell this goes to this puzzle. Look, it's got a big red square. So if you have a piece that's turned over, with a pink square, oh no, that's not right. We need the red piece. And so that's how we walk through that with really teaching them this. And another thing, as you're being structured, use your cues. And so look at your packaging for some of the toys. Instead of just ripping off the outside packaging without really looking at what you have, what can I say from this toy to really use as a visual cue for my little friends that are going to need more than my words to know how to do this, especially if you're trying to get them to really think about it and start to do some of it independently without you explaining it as comprehensively as I've kind of tried to do and walk through this here. But you can really talk about, look, these are the blocks, and we have 6 things we can put together. Look at this. This is the cow. Let's find the cow. And then you find the cow. And then you say something like, oh, let's see what we can do with this. And do the same kind of taking away some of the pieces so that a child really understands. And inevitably, he's going to put one of the other sides together that doesn't match. And so you can talk about that. So this is a really complex puzzle in my opinion. And so I think you're going to have a lot of fun with that and get to work on lots of different things that maybe you wouldn't normally work on as a speech language pathologist or even a developmental interventionist. So take a look at this kind of puzzle, much higher level cognitive skills. And so I think it's a great idea for kids between 3 and 4. Now let's talk about toy sets. And remember here we said that we were targeting mostly what we call replica play. So what do we say that means? That means that we're taking tiny little pieces. So these aren't life-size baby dolls and life-size props anymore. We have these teeny tiny little pieces. And again, kids are ready for this usually developmentally between 3 and 4. So this kind of play can be played in groups or with another child, for that early pretend play. But you're going to really need to start kids off with this individually first. And so I think it makes a fantastic therapy activity. I could seriously show you 20, 25 different sets that I own of this kind of stuff. But really, my point here is just variability. There is going to be something that a child that you are working with or a child that you are parenting loves. So start with those kinds of sets. And usually these sets are, they have some very traditional boy and girl themes, but they also have some themes that are really appropriate for both sets. And I think all themes, cowboys and Indians, pirates, I think little girls love to play with that just as much as little boys, and I know little boys love playing with baby doll things too, even here at 3 and 4. So look for those kinds of things. So Playmobil has some fantastic sets, but be sure that when you have a child that you're working with, that these small pieces are not going to be choking hazards for them. So be sure that you're using them with children who are no longer mouthing objects. Kids at this stage, though, love this kind of play, and you'll see them develop interest, and their attention spans get longer and longer and longer with staying with the same activity here with these kinds of sets, because you're providing lots and lots of interesting things for them to do. Now, don't neglect language as you are working on these play skills, and I think setup is a perfect time to really make sure that vocabulary wise you've targeted everything that a child is going to be using. And so here, I think I've said since a child was about 18 months here on this show, and actually it even goes before that, they need a word. They need to hear a word for everything that they are doing. And certainly here at this stage where you may be introducing some sets, or I hope you're introducing some sets where they don't have every single word in their vocabulary for what you're going to be teaching them. So use that time during setup as you're saying something like, oh, here's the beach. What do we see at the beach? What do we have? And then, all these pieces, these weren't assembled at the beginning. But you'll talk about, here's the tent so that they don't get too hot from the sun. Oh, here's an umbrella. Same thing. And so name these things as you're taking the pieces out. And then start to provide questions that will help a child really start to come up with his own play routine. So you're going to be asking questions like, what should I do? Who should I be? And remember, we said that a child during this stage acts as a stage manager, and he wants to direct other children and other people, including you, as you play. And so let him do that and facilitate that skill by asking some questions. Who are you going to be? Who am I going to be? As you pick up something, I'm the daddy. What will the daddy do next? So he's coming up kind of with those activities. Now, if a child doesn't have a response, you should model what he should say. So if you're saying something like, oh, I'm the baby. I want to be the baby today. So you're the daddy. So you have to take care of me. And then go immediately into something like, wah, 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 and pretend you're crying until the child says what's wrong or tries to do something to help the baby stop crying. And so again, you're going to see a child's wheels start to turn and see those opportunities there that you think, oh, he's not getting this. I've got to make this simpler, or I need to give him more words, or I need to cue him more. Maybe you would say, the baby's crying. Oh no, the baby's crying. What do you think the baby wants? What could we do to help the baby not cry? And so the child may come up with something different than what you've thought. You may be thinking, where's the bottle, or get the baby something to eat. And the child takes the baby and puts him in the tent. And so again, you're going to be able to have lots of opportunities for talking about what's going on with play and for really targeting these next skills. And I don't think I've mentioned this in this show, but this is why the handouts are so great from this podcast series, because you can sit there with your list of skills that you need to be working on with a child in this age range. And again, for parent education, it's a great tool to use as a therapist to be able to talk about these things with the parent and play with the child and show them these things, and then give them the handout as their tool to keep with them at home and read and really be able to work on those things. And so again, look for these sets with this Replica play. I don't know if you can see it over here, but you don't have to stick with something like Playmobil or Fisher Price or even an established kind of company with a play theme. You could go with some generic toys. This little pirate set is pretty cheap, and I didn't unload all of the different things that it includes, but I think there are probably 5 or 6 pirates in here, and a boat and an octopus and some trees and some treasure chest. And so again, tons of opportunities for creating some new play ideas as you play with a child. So when you have a child that's in this developmental level, Replica play, see what they're doing with that, and see if they've made that cognitive maturation, if they've achieved that, where they can take those playing with those life-size props that they've done now for a while and make it smaller and be able to still carry through those play themes. So it's a good developmental jump. So this is a great way to work on that in therapy. Now we're going to talk about blocks and how we can add blocks to really help children acquire that play skill. Remember what we said happens between 3 and 4. Children begin to build structures with blocks, not only for the purpose of building the tower or whatever, but it's to really use in play. So I don't know if you can see what I have on the table, but I have some farm animals and things. So this would be where a child starts to use any kind of block, and he could use something small like I have here with these orange blocks, just to construct a simple little pen or place for his animals to get in. And so again, this is going to be something great for you to talk about. And remember, as a child moves toward 4, he's going to make his structures more complex, and so he'll probably start to make like gates like we talked about, or maybe a tunnel like here with these great cardboard blocks. He can maybe build a tunnel for his cars or trains or whatever he's playing with there. And so use whatever kind of block you have available. You don't really have to go out and get new blocks or anything, but that's something that a child begins to do, and blocks are specifically mentioned for that purpose. And remember, it's symbolic, it's representational play. So it's certainly something we want to facilitate. So that's like little blocks. Let's talk about these big cardboard blocks. Now, these have been around for a long time. I remember playing with cardboard blocks when I was in the church nursery when I was 3 and 4. And these were Play-Doh and cardboard blocks were my favorite things there. And I bet you have some memories like that from your childhood too. So don't discard all of our classic traditional toys in favor of bells and whistles all the time for our little friends. And actually, toys like these cardboard blocks are listed as evidence-based practice for one of the universal play themes that we can use to facilitate peer interaction and peer engagement. And so when I'm starting with these blocks, and like we talked about back in that sequence for helping a child get from not even recognizing other children and being aware of them during play to actually cooperative play and associative play with a child. And so cardboard blocks are kind of a great in-between step. And so these materials, things like this and life-size props, and even things like the sensory boxes where we're using a larger activity so that more than one child could do the same thing, that's going to be a lot better than these smaller play opportunities or smaller play materials at the beginning. So these cardboard blocks. Let me tell you what I do with these to give you some ideas in case you've never played with these before. Building a tower, if you have them there just with another child and the children don't seem to know what to do. Building a tower is always kind of an early first thing to do, and as the adult you might just build the tallest tower you can before somebody gets ready to knock it down. That's a great thing to do. Having the children then help you build the tower after that, that can become lots and lots of fun, and that might be all that you do with the cardboard blocks that day. And your goals there are going to be what? Facilitate the children talking to each other, sharing the play, and what I mean by that is not only sharing the toys or the materials that they're playing with, but really sharing the experience, so sharing the enjoyment. So laughing together, doing the same things, looking at each other, coming up with new ideas, all of the body language that would indicate, even non-verbally, to another child that I want to play with you and I want to be with you. And remember, we said that between 3 and 4, that people become even more important than the toy. And so children want to play with each other, again, just for the sake of being together, just for that pure peer enjoyment there. So do things that, like helping a child, give another child a block. And so how do you do that? You just model it for them. You're giving it to them, you're giving it to the other child, you take it from them. And again, it doesn't begin with a long conversation between children. It really begins with these real simplistic ideas. So building the tower, having children help you build the tower or the tunnel or whatever you want to call it, whatever would fit with what you guys have been doing and already been playing. Building a road, so then you can either have the children walk on the road, and so kids can certainly walk on these cardboard blocks. I walk on these cardboard blocks. So that's fun to do. And again, making a road for vehicles. I've had kids pretend like the block is the car and everybody pushes the blocks, or even, getting 2 blocks together and pretending that they're pushing those across the floor. And, really as you're playing with kids, they're going to come up with their own ideas. But a cardboard block set is a great investment, particularly if you are a therapist and working on helping children begin to interact with other kids. So I wanted to be sure that you remembered this kind of block play, and certainly the more traditional block play. But again, our goal here between 3 and 4 is helping children use the blocks in play for early symbolic and representational play to build other structures. Now, the next kind of play is dress up. And I like dress up play, but only for kids when they're developmentally ready. And sometimes dress up play is more trouble than you want to take on during a therapy session, because if a child has lots and lots of sensory needs, and maybe he's tactile defensive, maybe cognitively he just doesn't understand what you're doing, wait until the child is a little more developmentally ready. And usually, and how do we know that? We know that by looking at the milestones. We know that by watching specific children. But here, using the milestones, that doesn't come in until 36 to 48 months. And so kids certainly might, like we talked about earlier, enjoy dress up as a 2-year-old, but their primary activities there are just looking at themselves and hearing your response and maybe then changing into a new outfit. Well, here dress up play takes on a whole new meaning, because they're actually using the costume to support what they're playing. And so I love these kinds of things. So you can get any kind of dress up set you want. You can go high end. I go low budget usually on these kinds of things, especially for therapy. So let me show you my favorite kinds of activities that we're using for this. And remember, I want to give you ideas not just for just a kid that everything's going to be easy for. I want to talk about the kids for whom it's not easy for. So what kinds of things can you do? I love, instead of full body costumes, these fantastic little vests. Now, I got this set from Amazon, and I don't think I've mentioned yet all the toys that I'm showing you today, or even mentioned today. I'll have them links to Amazon for them below here in the post on YouTube. Now, if you're listening on your podcast app, like on iTunes, go to Teach Me to Talk and look for show 473. And so you can click through there and find the recommended toy list there. But these vests are fantastic because they're just simple on and off. If the armholes were bigger, I could probably wear this vest too. And especially for a kid, without feeling constricted and without feeling like, ooh, get this off me. So you're not going to have that behavioral piece there. And so anything like vests, like hats, like little masks. And if you have a kid who is really, really resistant to dress up, now a mask might not be your best choice for this. But start even with the simpler things like hats that a child would probably tolerate because he probably wears that during his everyday life. Even something similar with something he would do every day, perhaps even in play anyway, like sunglasses, mom or dad's bigger shoes, start there. But again, at the beginning, dress up should just be for the purpose of, let me look at the outfit, let me practice taking this on and off. Let me look at myself in the mirror. Let me listen to the good things that you have to say to me. And then move on to talking about how you're going to use that as an early role or for early pretend play. So there's some great options that I'm listing here for you to take a look at. But don't forget things like, shopping after Halloween and buying, several different costumes, and don't get real stuck in those gender things. Again, little girls love to pretend like they are firefighters and postmen and doctors, all kinds of cool things are in this set. There's a construction worker, there's a chef, so making food, there's a police officer, there's an astronaut. So lots and lots of ideas. And I think sometimes that my best thing that I get out of toy shopping, even if I don't buy the toys, would just be new ideas. And so think about that, especially for your little guys who aren't quite there yet with all of this early role play. This is a great way to get them started. Introduce some really simple dress up things and follow that sequence. First, we're just going to get them in the costume and looking at it and listening to me talk about it and all of those kinds of things. And then we move on to the play piece. But these are some great ideas, and I hope you'll check it out. I wanted to say one or two more things about dress up before we leave this. So what do you say as you play dress up? Now, I like to just put out the costumes, and not 15 costumes, but maybe 2 or 3, or have them out so that a child can pick what he or she wants to be. And if you have a child who again is reluctant to do that, and they're staying with you, they're looking at the costumes, but they're not quite choosing that yet, start it with adult modeling. So say something like, I'll be a safari girl, and talk about that. Here's my hat. Look, I'm getting ready to go look for animals. I have my hat. Where's my vest? And then talk through that, with what would come next, all the materials that you would gather. And again, then once you get yourself ready, you say to a child, what will you be? Which one would you like to do? And so help them pick. And again, you're not going to really ever force a child to do dress up in this way, but just give them some ideas to get it going. And we talked about the simple ideas like the vest and the hats, but if you don't have that, or a parent doesn't have those kinds of resources available, if you're doing home visits, even something simple like tying a towel around a child's neck and pretending that it's a cape. And again, you probably are going to have to do it first. You tie the towel on you first and do some running around, like you're the superhero, and talk in character, and then get a child to want to do that with you. But anything like that, a little girl doesn't have to have a full princess outfit, just her mom's costume jewelry, some necklaces, some scarves, some of her mom's shoes, perhaps a hat, an old purse. So look for anything like that and talk to parents about it, and talk about what they already have and ways that they can encourage dress up in those kinds of situations. Now, again, this is so much fun for 3 and 4-year-olds, but I hope that your takeaway about dress up is going to be, I can start it at 2, and I certainly want to get kids familiar with that and dressing up if they like it and if they want to. We're not going to push a kid to do it if he's not ready because of his sensory issues. And when that happens, we're going to make it simpler and just provide these simple props. But then once they're past that, they've done that, gotten in the costumes for a while, and they're developmentally ready, then you're going to move on to help them transition that into storylines so that they can really start doing that early role play. Now, as we discussed, playing birthday party is one of the top preschool play routines. So let me give you some ideas to play. Now, you can go to really realistic props like this birthday hat, going to Dollar Tree or Dollar General, whatever dollar store you like to go to, Walmart, any of those places, and getting yourself just some props. So I like these big tall birthday hats, and I got that at Dollar Tree in case you're specifically wondering. And then things like balloons and birthday horns, those are going to be so fun. I love this little pretend birthday cake that I have here. I think this is a Patat toy, but I might be wrong about that. You'll have to look below with the toy list there. But super cute, really realistic prop to play birthday party. And so when I play birthday party, especially with a kid who has a lot of language and they're really, really talking, one of the best things that you can do here is plan your birthday party. And so you'll have all these items here together, but bring them out, pull them out of the bag, or let a child choose them from the bag, and you'll ID the objects as you go go. And actually, that's how I start even any kind of more sophisticated play routine. Even the simpler play routines is by pulling out all the pieces and talking about what they are, so that I know, like I said before, that a child has a label for every single thing that we're going to play with and that's related to our play theme there. And then talk about what your steps are going to be. And so when I play birthday party, I usually start again by taking everything out, and then I say, what should we do first? And then I always, pause for the child, but then invariably I jump in and say, I know, we should make a birthday cake. And so again, you can do that with a little realistic set like I have here. You can do it with any kind of cupcake or whatever that you have with your kitchen sets that you've played for with children for months now. Use the toy microwave that we introduced a couple of podcasts ago, or even a little kitchen set. And so pretend like you're going to bake the birthday cake, put it here in the microwave, and you can certainly do your whole play routine for that. When it gets out of the microwave, be sure to have your plate and your fork ready so that you can do like the next little step of play. So that's all, to get ready the cake. And then next you might say something like, hey, why don't we get some presents? And so, or whatever you would say, what should we get for the birthday girl? We usually have presents at a birthday party. And so help a child kind of think about that. If they're very creative, they may, again, go get something, or say a baby or a car, or come up with their own present. I like, again, using some of the materials that we had in previous stages. So remember, we had these little gifts that we used back when we talked about counting surprise party. And when we talked about this little toy before, we said that we were going to teach a lot of names for things, so a lot of vocabulary development exercise. But here we're reusing that and using this as the birthday gift when we're playing birthday party with a child. So I just love it when toys can do double, triple, quadruple duty from stage to stage to stage and actually move along with the child. Now be sure that you are, again, setting up the birthday party and getting everything ready, and then actually do the birthday party, where you really say, okay, now it's time for the party. Let's see whose birthday is it, and really, set that whole thing up. And the pinnacle of the birthday party is always what? It's singing happy birthday and blowing out the birthday candle. And so that's something fun to play. Now, I like this little set because it has pretend candles already with the flame there. Sometimes I've used real candles with kids, especially if it's their real birthday, and especially if we've been playing this for a few months, or even after their birthday, where they've done this, but now we're really ready, not for the pretend candle, but we're going to play and talk about the birthday candles in that way. We don't always have to have the real thing, but that's fun too. Now, to make it even more symbolic, and this is actually my favorite way to play birthday, is we make the birthday cake with Play-Doh. And so again, like we talked about in the last couple of shows when we've introduced Play-Doh, we want to wait until the child is going to be able to use the Play-Doh before we introduce it. If he's still too mouthy or still too icked out, certainly we're going to play with it with the purpose of helping him normalize his reaction to the Play-Doh and really begin to play and enjoy it and have fun. But he's got to be a little bit symbolic before Play-Doh is really going to make a whole lot of sense. So again, we want to use the materials that it would be appropriate for a child. So let's say we've made our birthday cake here, and you can even, again, make a candle for the birthday cake. And children love doing this, and they will pretend this with you over and over and over. And you don't have to be super artistic. As you can see here, how my birthday candle has turned out and my birthday cake. But kids love it, and they're very, very forgiving when you're playing. So don't worry about being super perfect when you're making these little things. But I love this, and I love, even with our pretend Play-Doh cake, using our accessories like the knife or the roller or whatever you've used for Play-Doh play. So here at 3 to 4, really, as you can see, is an opportunity to bring in things from previous stages and then help kids bump on up to that next little developmental level. But it's such a fun pretend play theme. And if you're a therapist and you routinely work with older 2s and 3s and 4-year-olds and don't have a birthday set kind of pulled together, get yourself a little set. Make yourself just a little bag of these materials because you will use them over and over and over again. I like the Mize's birthday book to go with this, and I think I've used that in previous shows. I forgot to get it out today to put it with this set. But even get yourself a book and read the book about the birthday party and then reenact the birthday party and do the same things that they did to get ready for it. Now, you can read the book all the way through and then begin your birthday party, or read the page and then pull it together, or read the book through and then use page by page, which is what I usually do to kind of pull it together, and then maybe read the book again at the end. So much fun. You can do an entire session with this and address lots and lots and lots of goals. Not only your play skill goals, but your language development goals too. So get yourself some materials assembled. And again, you don't have to just use the Amazon links here. Use stuff you already have so that you can pull that together, but make it a real fun, routine play experience for the kids on your caseload. Here's another one of our universal play themes for preschoolers. And remember, we said any version of a restaurant is always really fun for preschoolers here. So I just bought this ice cream set, and I think it is so cute. And I've had sets like this before, but I love it because it comes in its own box that we can put all of the little pieces in. And you've got ice cream here and yogurt and popsicles. So lots of fun things for a child to do. I love this set because for our kids here, it actually provides kind of some written cues and some visual information. So they even have the ice cream menu here. So you can, one child will always, well, not always, but one child will be the worker and one child will be the customer. And so, you have those different roles. And again, if you are a parent playing with your own child with this, you're going to do one of those roles and your child is going to be the other role. And so, walk through that whole sequence. They're going to come into your shop and you're going to greet them. Hello, may I take your order? Or what kind of ice cream do you want? And you can show them the menu and they can pick and they can point. And so then the person who's the worker makes their food that they've chosen. Now you can certainly add some things to this. I have this new little teapot set that I think is adorable. I want to push the buttons and play the music for you because it's kind of that magical, almost Disney-esque pretend music, but it's a little too loud for the show and it plays a long time. So I'm not going to do that. But great little addition to this. And then as you're working, through that whole process of making your order and buying the food. And then I love this set because it has some pretend money too. And so a child then has something to pretend. Now, if you don't have the prop there with the money, still have the child be symbolic about it. When the worker say, that'll be $2 or whatever. And then you help your child, pretend he's going to put his hands in his pockets and get out some money, and then plop it in the other kid's hand. So anything that you can do, even if it's a representational step, or actually that would be better, through this whole thing. But I love this set, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Another thing that you can target here language-wise would be your verb tenses. And remember, even irregular verbs, that's just going to go by experience. What did you do with the popsicle? I licked the popsicle. And then our irregular verb here, I ate my ice cream. I poured some tea. I licked the cupcake, or I bit, an irregular verb instead of bited the cupcake. So work on your verb tenses here too. I think it's a great set for doing that. But this is a wonderful play option for kids. And so I hope that you're getting some kind of restaurant theme in when you're playing with your preschoolers. Now, since we've been talking about peer play, a bowling set is another really, really early fun game to get going for kids who are in this preschooler range. Now, again, you can do this with 2-year-olds, and so I don't want you to think that I'm saying, hey, don't introduce this until a kid is 3. But what I am saying is for it to be really cooperative, where children are really, really engaged in taking turns and really not getting too upset with that. You probably do have to wait until they're a little bit older, 2 or 3 to 4. So let's talk about what to do when things things aren't going well, when you have kids that, again, aren't quite ready for it and you're figuring out, what can I do to make this simpler? The first thing is, don't insist that a child follow all the rules all the time. That is completely unrealistic, and you're just going to be setting yourself up to do nothing but manage behavior the whole time. And so I said this on the last show, but I haven't said it on this one yet. If all you're doing is managing behavior, like constantly saying, stop, it's his turn, you have to share, you're not really targeting what you're probably supposed to be working on, because if it takes that much effort, the child is not there developmentally yet. And so you've always got to make it simpler. So when you have something going on like that, even with a game like this, always think about not necessarily, I'm going to put the game up and we're going to do that in 6 months, although that's an option. But think about, how can I make the game simpler for what we're doing right now? So instead of making kids just take, stand in one line and everybody gets one turn, and don't do that. Just kind of go with the flow more. And so you may have to quickly set up the pins yourself, or have another child that's kind of their job, a child that would want to do that, be assigned to do that, or everybody, help set up the pins, and then whoever ends up with the ball, you're just going to do something to try to get the pins down, whether it's, that one kid rolls the ball or 2 or 3 other kids run up and kick the pins down, which is going to inevitably happen at first. But my point is, don't be so ingrained in we have to play exactly the right way and everybody has to line up, and that's never going to work. So think about having fun and prioritizing togetherness and playing together and talking together, rather than strictly rule compliance with this sort of thing. The other thing that I want to say like this is, these kinds of games, gross motor play is a great step toward teaching children to want to be with other children. And even when we have our little friends who are still in those very beginning phases of wanting to join in, bowling is a great game to introduce that with, because again, they can walk over, they can kick the pin down, they can take a turn with the ball. But for those kids, even if they're over kind of on the sidelines, just watching, that's certainly a step in the right direction if they've never done that before. So having fun together ought to be your primary goal for any kind of game that you introduce to a child. And start with these kinds of gross motor games first, and get this kind of thing going where even if you're not completely following all the rules of the game, you're certainly heading in the right direction. And then you can introduce some of the games that I'll show you coming up next. So now I want to show you my very favorite, more traditional early games that we can play with toddlers. And some of these are sort of board games and some aren't, but they're a great way to introduce these games. And again, we're talking about kids who are preschoolers here at that 3 to 4 year old range, and you may start some of these games earlier when a child is 2. But again, if you're introducing another child, that may be a little more difficult for some of our little friends. So starting with some of these games with an adult, so with you as the child's therapist or mother, or what you're going to want to do with it at the very beginning. Now, this is one of my favorite early games. It's called Pop-Up Pirate. And the whole point of this game is to insert the swords until the pirate pops. And so super fun, a game for kids. There's that element of surprise. They're all kind of waiting on the pirate. Sometimes it takes a long time until you can find the right slot to get the sword in to make the pirate pop up. So it also teaches some tolerance and some flexibility as you're playing too. Kids can also, work on requesting with this. You can hold all the swords. Again, I have everything in my plastic Ziploc bags. You can hold the swords and have the kids request from that. You can have them ask for 2 different colors. So if you're working on conjunctions here, from 3 to 4, I want red and blue. I want green and yellow. So great way to target those early conjunctions too. If a child isn't, again, really ready for that, certainly you can still target other kinds of requests too. But I wanted to mention that super fun game, and I know you'll have a lot of fun with it. It's kind of a staple speech therapy toy. So if you don't have one of these, you should think about adding this to your toy inventory. I also work a lot on early articulation with this game. So pirate and pop and push and pull. So those early bilabials with that P, get a good workout with this game. So even if that's the only reason you buy it, it's still a good good investment for you. Now, my next toy pick is this classic game of Lucky Ducks, and I'm sure that you've seen this toy before. I am not going to push the button and activate the duck noise because the quacking can get a little obnoxious, if you know what I mean. But it's a great game for kids. Now, you can play from a simple version where there are no rules, just that everybody has some ducks and we all laugh and take turns. Maybe not even take turns, but that each of us pushes the button and puts a duck on and we watch them go around and then somebody else makes it stop. And so certainly a game of go and stop can be a lot of fun with Lucky Ducks, and that's how I almost always started off with every kid. And this is a game too that children, if they have just some early splinter skills, like even if you have a 2-year-old who's really matching colors, this is, again, a fun game for that, and a way to help a kid use an interest or, even a little borderline obsession to really start to play with you and kind of use that interest a little bit more interactively. This set with, I'm going to take Ernie off here. He's the head of the go button. This set does not come with game cards that actually have, say, the red circle already marked, the spots already marked out so that a child can put his match on it. So there are tons of variations of Lucky Ducks. So I'm going to probably make that for this set so that I can use it in that way. And then if a child has, a place for all of his 3 or 4 ducks, probably 3 red circles on the bottom of this duck, he has a place and he'll know kind of when he wins or when he's finished. So this is, again, a great introductory game, but I hardly ever use it the first way it's intended, right out of the box with a child. We nearly always have to have some getting used to the game and just making ourselves really able to then play the game correctly because we've already gotten through all that exploration piece. But Lucky Ducks is a popular classic game for preschoolers, and I hope that you're using that, and I wanted to recommend that to you today. Now for our last toy today, let's talk about some kind of go fishing set. And I'm not talking about the card game. Here we can either use a bigger set like a Melissa and Doug set where and I'll link it here below, but not life-size fishing poles, but a lot bigger than we have here, and where they're catching bigger fish. And again, there's so many versions of this, but it's such a fun activity. I like the board game version. And again, remember what we said about board games with toddlers and preschoolers. You're almost always not going to follow the rules at the beginning, where you're all taking turns and that kind of thing, and where everything gets matched up properly. At the beginning, it's just about having fun and exposure and practice with this kind of thing. Now, there are 4 different fishing poles, and usually with any set that you get, you're going to have 3 or 4 fishing poles. So I kind of let every child take just play at the same time. And I think that's really more developmentally appropriate. You're probably going to have to control the chaos a little more like that. But at the beginning, everybody's just having fun and laughing. And you can do some things where you tell the child to only catch the green fish, or his color is green, or her color is pink. But I don't really play it that way. I just use these opportunities with board games. It's just a way to get a kid interacting and laughing and used to the idea that we're going to all play together. And as we begin to use the game and we've had enough time to explore it and find out that you like it, then you begin to take those individual turns. Now, as a therapist, you might get this going a little sooner with the child than you would if there were some other kids there, but always make your turn as the adult super fast. Don't take a full turn. And if you are having trouble with that, or have a kid who just has just a millisecond of an attention and tolerance for you to take a turn, you're going to need to extend that gradually. You're not going to be able to sit there and say, no, you have to wait until I get this fish on my pole before it's your turn. So again, have some grace and even some compassion for a child who is just so excited that he or she wants to play. And so think about your other goals that you can do for this. Certainly our traditional goals of requesting, I want the green pole, I'll try to catch the yellow fish, whatever kind of little comment or requesting you have there. But talk about the game. And even words like we said, those meta-linguistic and meta-communicative little things. Remember we said that we could use a lot of gestures, and really when we're role-playing here. But here, in any kind of role play game, but here specifically I'm talking about things like, she said she wanted blue. He told us he wants yellow. So that would be a way to kind of, again, work on that higher level language skill within the context of a super fun board game that you're introducing to one of your little friends and then some other little friend who's coming in to help you. Now, I haven't said this yet with this show. We're talking about early role play and early pretending with peers, but sometimes you have to really, really be careful with the child that you're using as the other child for the child that you're working with who's on your speech therapy caseload. Sometimes our kids who are the typically developing kids are a little more hard to control, for lack of a better word, than our kids that we are working with. So make sure that your typically developing peers that you're using are coachable. Sometimes it does help to use a sibling in that role, and that's why working with families can be so fun, because you've got the other almost same age peer right there with you, and you can certainly mitigate those circumstances that cause lots of difficulty for mom during the week. The normal things like sharing and taking turns and that kind of thing. And you can do that within a context, again, that a child is very familiar with, so it's not going to be quite as devastating when his brother or sister get a little longer term than him than a child he doesn't know and he doesn't have that extra benefit of security and love and all those other things. All right, so that's a great game too, and you can find lots of versions of this little Let's Go Fishing game. I bet this is the 10th or 12th version I've had of a game like this. So it's a mainstay for speech therapy too, and I wanted to be sure that you know about a game like this. Now, I have some other games that I use in therapy listed here in the recommended toy section. So I love Elephant. That's another gross motor game where kids are catching butterflies with their nets. I love Hungry Hippos, where it's more like a board game and everybody sits. So that's kind of a later game where we're all sitting together and pushing the lever on your hippo to hurriedly eat all the marbles there. So that's a fun game. And then I love the Sneaky Snacky Squirrel game. And I've actually done an entire video about that, so I'll try to post the link for that game here below. All right, that is it for our toys here for Stage 8, and actually, that's it for our entire Stages of Play podcast series. So I hope that you've been with me through this whole series. We've had shows 465 here to now at show 473, so lots of information all the way back for children in that earliest exploratory stage of play, and then we worked them on up to non-functional play, and then they started with that earliest familiar objects, familiar toys, and then we worked on to toys that had just kind of one-step actions where we just wanted a child to begin that early pretending by putting on sunglasses or remember we had the Pretend With Me backpack, and we had children take the toys out and show us and demonstrate how a toy or an item would be used, and then we worked up into using 2 steps in pretend play, and then more and more and more to all the way up here to our 3 and 4-year-old level. Now, if you were with me back for the introductory show at 465, we also talked about kids in that 5 to 6-year-old stage range. We're not going to do that here with the show because, frankly, that's not our audience here at Teach Me to Talk. But if you need information about that, go back and look at show 465 because there were some great ideas for that period, and that information is actually included in the chart back, which was the handout for show 465. All right, if you need more information for working with children who have speech language delays, but again, you are working on their specific goals, let me redirect you to some resources, some of which I've already mentioned. The first one is Teach Me to Talk, the Therapy Manual, and this is a manual for therapists and for parents that lists those specific milestones and ways to target those milestones with common toys and everyday activities at home. So if you don't have Teach Me to Talk, the Therapy Manual, and you're trying to really get progress on very specific goals, this is your go-to manual for that. My newest manual is the Late Talker Workbook, and I have 3 different plans, so you can pick based on your own priorities or on a family's priorities what treatment approach would be better for them. So if you want a sit-down scheduled structured way to do therapy. Plan A is here in this book. Plan B is for building language at home, so lots of strategies for parents to use in everyday routines. And then Plan C is more of a comprehensive plan for children who need to address one of the foundational pieces for learning to communicate, and that's going to be included in Plan C, where you will learn the 6 C's of communication and how to walk a child through that. And then lastly, if you have a child that you're working with autism or suspected autism, the Autism Workbook is a comprehensive treatment plan that is already written for you. So all you have to do is fill out the checklist and then work through the workbook questions that come in every chapter, and you will know exactly what to do to help a child with autism develop his social communication skills. All right, so that is really it for this show and for this series. I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's show number 473. If you need to go get your credit at Teach Me to Talk for this whole entire course, you can find the link right here below. And lastly, I want to thank you for hanging in here with me for this long show for 3 to 4 year olds. And I so hope that not only in this show, but in the whole series, that you found ideas that you can use to help you in your everyday practice or with your own child at home. So thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.